elderly woman whispers to Elon Musk in Chipotle. Hearing her words, he breaks down. It was just an ordinary day at Chipotle. A typical lunch rush where people bustled around, picking up their burritos and bowls. Elon Musk, dressed down in a hoodie and jeans, sat quietly in the corner booth, scrolling through his phone. No one really seemed to notice him. Just another guy grabbing a quick meal. But all that changed when an elderly woman walked in. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane, and there was something about her that made heads turn. She wasn't famous, not someone you'd recognize, but she had a presence. Her eyes, though soft and tired, had a sharpness to them, like they had seen more than most could ever imagine. As she shuffled through the line, something caught her attention. She paused, looking directly at Elon. A small smile crossed her lips, and without a second thought, she made her way toward him. Elon didn't seem to notice her at first, lost in whatever he was reading. But as she got closer, the energy in the room shifted. It wasn't anything you could put your finger on, just a subtle tension in the air, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. She stopped right in front of him, leaning slightly on her cane. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chatter. Elon looked up, his brow furrowing in curiosity. He didn't recognize her, but there was something about her that made him pause. Maybe it was the way she stood there so calmly. Or maybe it was the fact that she had approached him without any sign of hesitation or awe. For a moment, the two just stared at each other, the bustling restaurant fading into the background. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper, she said something to him, something that no one else could hear. Whatever it was, it hit him hard. His expression shifted, the calm and collected mask he always wore slipping away in an instant. His face fell, eyes widening in shock, disbelief, and something deeper. Pain, maybe. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to process her words. And then, before anyone could react, Elon Musk, the man known for sending rockets into space, building electric cars, and being one of the most powerful figures in tech, broke down, his shoulders hunched forward, and he buried his face in his hands. The whole restaurant went silent. People glanced at each other, unsure of what they had just witnessed. What could an elderly woman have possibly said to make someone like Elon Musk, of all people, break like that? The woman didn't say anything else. She just placed her hand gently on his shoulder, offering a small nod before turning away. No, one moved to stop her as she quietly left the restaurant, leaving Elon alone, still trying to recover from whatever had just happened. But what had she said? What secret could this mysterious woman have whispered that would bring a man like Elon Musk to tears? That's the question no one could answer. And that's where this story begins. Elon sat there for a while, stunned by the weight of the elderly woman's words. His hands shook slightly as he wiped his face, still trying to pull himself together. The bustling sounds of Chipotle seemed distant, as though the world had slipped into slow motion around him. What had she meant? How could something so simple shake him to his core? The people nearby had noticed, of course. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the restaurant. Some recognized him, whispering his name, while others simply stared, unsure of what had just happened. But Elon didn't care about the attention. His mind was spinning, replaying the woman's words over and over. They weren't harsh or cruel. In fact, they had been soft, almost gentle, but there was something deeper beneath them. Something that had struck a chord within him that he didn't even know existed. As he finally stood up, his phone buzzing in his pocket with notifications from a world that suddenly felt far away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this woman wasn't just a stranger. There was something familiar about her, as if she had known him, truly known him, in a way no one else did. But how? And why now? Later that evening, Elon found himself back in his office, staring out the window at the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. And yet his mind was still stuck on that moment in Chipotle. He had dealt with pressure all his life, being the face of cutting-edge technology, pushing humanity toward the future. But this was different. This wasn't about work or expectations. This felt personal, as if the woman had unlocked something buried deep within him. His assistant, always sharp and perceptive, knocked on the door and entered cautiously. "Elon, are you okay? You've been quiet since the meeting ended," she asked, her tone laced with concern. He looked at her, trying to find the right words. Should he tell her? Would anyone even understand? "I don't know," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. "Something happened today, something strange." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued but careful not to push too hard. "What do you mean?" "There was this woman at Chipotle. She said something to me, something I can't stop thinking about," Elon explained, his voice trailing off as he struggled to explain what he didn't fully understand himself. His assistant waited patiently, knowing there was more to the story. "Did you know her?" she asked, stepping closer. Elon shook his head, but then hesitated. "No." "But there was something about her. It felt like she knew me," the assistant nodded slowly, sensing the depth of the situation. "Do you want me to look into it? Maybe we can find out who she is." Elon considered the offer for a moment before shaking his head again. "No, I don't think it's that simple. This wasn't just some random encounter." He paused, running a hand through his hair, frustrated that he couldn't articulate what was bothering him. "It felt like a warning, or maybe a message. But I don't know what to do with it." Days passed, but the memory of the elderly woman's words lingered. Elon found himself distracted at work, missing key details in meetings, and even losing focus during important discussions. His team noticed the shift in his behavior, though no one dared mention it. To them, Elon had always been an unstoppable force, driven by his vision of the future. But now, there was something different about him, a quiet unease that followed him wherever he went. In the days that followed, Elon became consumed with trying to make sense of the encounter. He replayed the woman's face in his mind, searching for any clue that might help him understand her message. He even returned to the Chipotle several times, hoping she might show up again, but she never did. The mystery weighed heavily on him, and he couldn't help but wonder if there was something more going on, something bigger that he had overlooked. One evening, while lying awake in bed, Elon suddenly remembered something. The woman had said a name. It was subtle, barely noticeable at first, but now it hit him like a lightning bolt. She had mentioned a name that he hadn't heard in years, a name from his past, long before Tesla, SpaceX, or any of the fame. It was someone he had lost touch with, someone he had tried to forget. The realization sent chills down his spine. How did she know? How could a complete stranger know something so personal? Something he had buried deep inside. The next morning, Elon wasted no time. He reached out to old contacts, people he hadn't spoken to in years, searching for any trace of the name the woman had whispered. But every lead came up cold. No one seemed to know anything about the person he was looking for. It was as if they had vanished without a trace. Days turned into weeks, and the tension continued to build. Elon felt like he was running out of time, as if the woman's words were more than just a message. They were a ticking clock, counting down to something he couldn't yet understand. He began to question everything, his choices, his successes, even the path that had brought him to this point. Was he missing something crucial? Was there something he needed to do, something he had overlooked all these years? The suspense was unbearable. The deeper he dug into his past, the more questions arose, and yet the answers seemed just out of reach. The encounter with the woman had set something in motion, and Elon knew he couldn't rest until he figured out what it was. But with every passing day, the mystery grew darker, and the stakes felt higher. Whatever the woman had meant, it wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger, something that could change everything. But what? And why had she chosen him to deliver the message? Elon Musk's mind raced as the weeks turned into sleepless nights. The name the elderly woman whispered haunted him. He had built rockets, created electric cars, and revolutionized industries. But now he found himself grappling with a mystery that felt deeply personal. This wasn't something he could solve with technology or a brilliant team. It was something rooted in his past, something he had buried and forgotten, or maybe just ignored. One late evening, as he stared at the blank screen of his laptop, an email came through. The sender was anonymous, but the subject line was chilling. "You know what you need to do." Elon hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He opened the email, and there it was, an address, a time, and a message. "Come alone. It's time to understand." Despite the cryptic nature of the message, Elon felt compelled to go. There was no turning back now. If this was connected to the woman in Chipotle, he needed to know why. The next evening, he drove to the location, a small, unassuming house in a quiet neighborhood, far removed from the life he was used to. The air felt heavy, like something important was about to happen. As he knocked on the door, it creaked open, and standing there was the same elderly woman. She didn't look surprised to see him. In fact, it was almost as if she had been expecting him all along. Without a word, she motioned for him to come inside. Elon stepped in, his heart racing with anticipation, fear, and curiosity. The room was dimly lit, filled with the scent of old books and worn-out memories. She led him to a small table where a single photograph rested. Elon stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. It was a picture of him as a young boy, standing next to his mother, and beside them was the woman. How is this possible?" Elon asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman looked at him, her eyes filled with a knowing sadness. "You've forgotten, Elon," she said softly. "But I haven't. You were a bright child, always asking questions about the world, always wanting to know more. I was there when you were young, guiding you, but as you grew older, you chose a path that led you away from the things that mattered most. You focused on the future, on technology, but somewhere along the way, you lost sight of who you truly are." Elon felt a wave of confusion and emotion wash over him. "But I've done so much. I've helped humanity move forward," he insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "Yes, you have," she nodded. "But the price has been your connection to the people closest to you. You've distanced yourself from those who loved you, your family, your roots. You've been so focused on what's ahead that you've forgotten to look back." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. His entire life had been a relentless pursuit of progress, but in that pursuit, he had left behind the very people who had shaped him, his mother, his childhood, the simple moments of connection. They had all been sacrificed in the name of ambition. But why now? "Why did you wait so long to tell me this?" Elon asked, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and guilt. "Because you weren't ready before," she replied. "But now, you're at a crossroads. You've achieved everything you set out to do, and yet, you're more lost than ever. It's time to remember where you came from. It's time to reconnect with your past, with the people who love you. That's why I came to you." Elon stood there, overwhelmed by the truth of her words. The woman wasn't some mysterious figure from the outside world. She was a part of his past, a reminder of the life he had once known before the weight of responsibility and fame had consumed him. And now, standing before her, he understood what she had been trying to tell him all along. The climax wasn't some grand revelation about technology or the future. It was about something much more personal. The simple truth that success means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. Elon felt a deep sense of regret, but also a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, he knew what he needed to do. He thanked the woman quietly and left the house, driving home with a new sense of purpose. The next day, he called his mother. He reached out to his children, to old friends, people he had let drift away over the years. It wasn't easy, but slowly, he began to rebuild those connections. He took time off work, spent more moments with the people who mattered, and focused less on what he could achieve and more on who he could be for those around him. In the end, the message from the woman wasn't about changing the world. It was about changing himself. And as Elon Musk, the visionary and entrepreneur, began to heal old wounds and reconnect with his past, he realized that true success wasn't measured by how far he could push humanity forward, but by how deeply he could reconnect with the things that made him human in the first place. And that's where the story truly ends. Not in a burst of innovation or groundbreaking technology, but in a quiet moment of understanding, of remembering who you are and where you come from, and knowing that sometimes the most important journey isn't one toward the future, but one that leads back home.